What you're about to hear today isn't some myth or a legend or a spooky campfire tale. It is an authentic historical narration. We're talking about a companion of the Prophet who literally claimed he met Dajjal on a mysterious island. Welcome back to part 2 of this explainer. Let's dive right in. And before we jump into the timeline, let me be crystal clear about the source material. This comes directly from Sahih Muslim, specifically narrations 2942 and 2937. For those of you who study this, you know that means it's rigorously authenticated. The stakes of this historical record are absolutely massive.
Section 1. The Storm at Sea.
So his name was Tamim ad-Dari. Now, before he accepted Islam, he was a seasoned Christian sailor. One day, he's sailing with a crew of about 30 men when a violent sea storm catches them completely off guard. And we are just talking about a couple of rough days. They drifted out there, totally lost at sea, for nearly an entire month. Can you imagine the sheer exhaustion? Finally, right around day 30, they wash up on the shores of an uncharted, mysterious island.
Section 2. Meeting the Beast. Well, any relief they felt having solid ground beneath their feet vanishes almost immediately. Because the moment they step onto the island, they realize they aren't alone. They see this incredibly strange creature, and it's covered with so much thick, matted hair that they physically couldn't tell its front from its back. They couldn't even figure out where its face was. These 30 hardened sailors are completely startled by this anomaly. You really have to put yourself in their shoes here. They're exhausted, shipwrecked, and now facing this hairy, faceless thing. Driven by a powerful mix of total terror and overwhelming curiosity, the men finally find their voices. They call out to the beast and ask a very direct question. Who are you? And to their utter shock, it actually answers them. The creature replies, I am Al-Jassasah. But it doesn't just stop there. It gives them an order. It points them toward a nearby monastery and says, Go to the man in the monastery. He is eager to hear your news. Frightened, but honestly just incredibly curious about who the stranger could be, the 30 men start walking toward the building. Section 3. The Chained Giant. They cautiously enter the structure, and inside, they find a huge, imposing man. And get this, his hands are chained tight to his neck, and his legs are bound with thick iron. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. But the giant doesn't even introduce himself. He launches straight into a rapid-fire interrogation. He demands to know the status of very specific places. He asks about the date palm trees of Baisan, Lake Tiberias, and the Spring of Zugar. And then he drops the ultimate question. Has the prophet of the unlettered people appeared? Tamim and his companions look at the chained giant and answer yes. They explain that Muhammad, peace be upon him, had indeed appeared in Makkah and migrated to Medina. And let me tell you, that simple confirmation is the spark that triggers the climax of this entire encounter. Section 4. Dajjal's Dark Prophecy.
Upon hearing that the prophet has arrived, the giant realizes his time is coming. Imagine standing in that dim monastery, hearing the clinking of heavy iron chains as this massive figure leans in and confesses, I am Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, the false Messiah, right there, imprisoned on an isolated island. The sheer shock of who this prisoner actually is completely paralyzes the men.
He then shares a terrifying prophecy with them. The Dajjal says that a time is coming when he will be permitted to leave. He claims he will travel across the earth, entering nearly every single city at incredible speeds. But he explicitly admits there are 2 major exceptions. He will be forbidden from entering Makkah and Madinah, telling the sailors that angels with drawn swords will strictly guard those borders.
Section 5. The Prophet's Confirmation.
Eventually, Tamim ad-Dari and his crew make it off that island. Later on, Tamim actually embraces Islam, travels to Medina, and recounts this exact horrifying ordeal to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And the Prophet didn't just keep this private. He gathered everyone in the mosque. After the prayer, he stood up and announced, Tamim ad-Dari has told me a story that agrees with what I had already told you about Dajjal. By doing this, the Prophet publicly anchored the absolute authenticity of Tamim's story.
Okay, so the encounter is verified. We know where he's chained. But as we wrap up this explainer, a massive question still hangs over us. What will Dajjal actually do when those chains finally break and he is released?
Because we know from the sources that it won't just be a military conquest, it's going to be a devastating spiritual crisis. How on earth will he manage to deceive millions of people?
And most importantly, who will finally step up to defeat him when all hope seems lost? We are going to uncover all of those answers in part 3, inshallah ta'ala. Until then, keep learning
and I'll catch you in the next explainer.